Here in the NFC East, D. Wood, how about them Dallas Cowboys? What grade would you give their draft?
Yeah, I'll give them a B+. I mean, listen, you're getting one of the top players in Caleb Downs, a leader back there at the safety position. Not only can play the deep half of the middle of the defense, but also can possibly play the nickel. Then you go out and get Malachi Lawrence, a pass rusher, that has elite get off. And so when you look at the Dallas Cowboys, they address a couple key positions on that defense.
Yeah, I thought it was extremely good. That's a tough grade. D. Wood would have been a tough professor. Peter, what draft grade would you give the Eagles?
Maybe I'm just easy. I thought everyone in the NFC East did well. I give the Eagles an A, and it's not just because of Mekhi Lemon and Eli Stowers, who's a tight end they got in the second round. I love that they made the trade for Jonathan Grenard, who is a veteran pass rusher who could replace Jalen Phillips, who they had the second half of last season. Howie Roseman's a madman as far as manipulating the draft board. I thought he played chess very well this weekend.
He's extraordinary, and that story of how they got him is quite remarkable. Finally, Dan, how about the New York Football Giants?
Yeah, I'm going to give the Giants I don't remember my grade.
A B.
A B, partly because I never got B's and A's when I was a student. Harbaugh Reese, unbelievably athletic and talented player. Francis Mauigoa, the big tackle from Miami. I love the fact that they've rebuilt this offensive line. It's probably going to be the best offensive line the Giants have had in a decade. Honestly, I wanted a receiver in the second round at 37. They get Malachi Fields in the third round. Out of Notre Dame. So that's why it's a B, because I really thought a playmaker at 37 was something that I desired more.
Well, the Giants playmaker was one of those who had some questions about what they did. You may have seen this, but in case you haven't, I'm going to play you what Malik Nabers said the night of the draft. Malik Nabers, who was their star receiver who got hurt early last season, he was commentating live on Micah Parsons' podcast when the Giants made their pick of Arvell Reese. So you're going to hear what Nabers said, and then you're going to hear John Harbaugh reacting to it right after that.
Don't get me wrong, I love the player, but just like, where do you play? Like, you wanna be on the outside and rush, but we just drafted somebody last year.
One thing that you'll kind of probably see as we go here, we don't get too worried about stuff. Malik wants to know how we're going to use our first round pick. I want to show him. I want to explain it to him, and the fact that he says it publicly, who cares?
That was a fascinating reaction from John Harbaugh. Malik Nabers then came back on social media and said, first off, we have to stop overreacting. I would never intentionally take away from the biggest moment or night of Arvell's life. Very excited to see him play on the team and happy that we have another dog on the squad. So, Peter, we were talking about this morning. How would you sum up this whole rigmarole?
Yeah, I think Nabers made his comments, and then Friday morning, first thing, right after that, he spoke with Harbaugh, and they had an open exchange. And then Harbaugh goes up in front of the media, and that was only a snippet of it. I think he really nipped it in the bud and basically said, I've spoken to Malik. I love Malik. His heart's in a good place. And also, let's look at the big picture here. And it was a very good, candid thing with Joe Shane standing right next to him. But I think more than anything, for Giants fans, it was, oh my gosh, there's an adult in the room who handled this already and has an open heart and is moving on. Guess who the first player to greet Arvell Reese at the facility was when he got there? Malik Nabers. They're good. They're going to be just fine. This is the Harbaugh era where we are going to be able to handle things, which could be a New York City controversy. If you know Page 6, they like to dig in on these things. And if you know the New York City media, they like to dig in on these things. Harbaugh kind of put it to bed. Nabers, Arvell Reese, they're okay. I almost feel like that's a bigger win than the Giants haul this weekend.
Yeah, I understand that. You played in this market, so you have a sense of it here. Was that whole, we have a Giant fan on our show, John Fink, who's easily aggrieved.
Fink?
He's easily aggrieved, but he was upset by the whole Nabers.
The sun rose.
Yeah, Fink doesn't like almost anything. But he was upset about the Nabers of it all. What did you think of it?
No, I thought John Harbaugh handled it beautifully, to be honest with you. Listen, this is the era that we're in. It seems like a lot of players have podcasts and they want to voice their opinion. And so, I think John Harbaugh just gets it. He understands. I don't think nothing that Malik's Nabers said was malicious or anything like that. He asked made a legitimate statement. And John Harbaugh, to his credit, came out in the press conference like, listen, I understand where he's coming from. I'm going to show him. I talked to him. It's all good. And in this market, in this New York market, that's what you got to do.
You seem iffy on it.
Well, great leadership is great to have. And this is great leadership by Coach Harbaugh. The only thing I would say is I hope that it's a little bit of a learning example for Malik Nabers. You're the star wide receiver of the New York Giants in New York City. When you say something, the whole world is going to hear it. And so I'm not going to bash the young man. He's 22 years old. I love the talent Malik Nabers is. I just hope it is a little bit of a learning experience, both publicly and privately, of saying, hey, I can appreciate what you said. your words carry a lot of weight.
Look, this is 2026. Life has become a Mad Lib. Remember Mad Libs who just fill in things? So Malik Neighbors was on Micah Parsons' podcast commenting on the Giants' first-round draft pick, Arvell Reese. All of that said, I thought the Giants had a great draft. Yeah. Absolutely great. Who was it that gave them their grade? It was.
I thought that was. I said, first of all, I think the NFC East, a lot of the teams.
That's a great draft. Look,
I agree.
Colton Hood, people thought was going to be a first-round pick.
Can I add something on Fields?
Yeah.
You know, Barry Jackson from the Miami Herald said that the Dolphins had a really high grade on Fields, and that would have been their pick. So the Giants somehow knew that, had intel. They traded up, and a lot of people were like, they're trading up for Malachi Fields. We just watched him all these Saturdays. They traded up, and guess what? If their intel was right, another team's going to take them right afterwards.
I think that there were, look, I can't speak for teams. There were definitely people who analyzed the draft for a living who thought that Arvell Reese was the best defensive front seven player and that Francis Mauigoa was the best offensive lineman. Yeah. So they may have gotten the best defensive player and the best offensive player at 5 and 10.
Really, it's Mauigoa and Malachi Fields for me. Those are like the two people that are going to swing it. I think Arvell Reese is going to be a good player, but the Giants have had a bad offensive line for a decade. Talent-wise, this is the best offensive line they had in a long time. In Malachi Fields, a lot of people tested very well, athletic player, can go make plays down the field. If he becomes a really good, number 2 receiver, I agree.
And I know they have a lot of edge guys now who all theoretically do the same thing. But when they won the Super Bowls, didn't they have that NASCAR package where they were constantly running guys in and out of there?
Running off the edge.
I mean, if you're an offensive tackle, are you looking at the other team and thinking, oh, they've got 4 guys who can rush the passer and all? I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a good thing. They got you because they're all unique. Yeah. And there's nothing, as an offensive lineman, there's nothing scarier than a bunch of smaller guys lined up on you that can make you look stupid out there.
They were historically bad stopping the run last year. In the history of the Giants, the worst ever. That's going to have to improve before those pass rushers really impact the game.
All right, we have much more to do on the draft as we continue. We will also say
he's going top 10. He slips to 15. But guess what? He's going to a franchise that looked at him as their top dude off the edge, and also going to a team that is playoff ready, and to a coach, Todd Bowles, who will use them. More than anything, the Bucs wanted Bain, and Bain's going to be playing with an enormous chip on his shoulder. I am fired up to see Ruben Bain, who is all business, going to Tampa.
What do you think of that one, Dan? What do you think of that pick, Ruben Bain?
I thought the Ruben Bain pick and the Keontae Scott pick, 4th round, the cornerback out of Miami, were both outstanding picks. The Buccaneers continue to draft well. They were a very good football team last year, dealt with little injuries down the stretch. I know no Mike Evans, but everyone's, and rightfully so, Rams, the NFC West, all that. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be a fantastic group again.
D-Wood, how about the other side? Give me someone you thought did not come out so well from this draft.
How about the 49ers? You know, they trade out of the first round and pick a receiver, in the top of the second round. Mm-hmm. When, Denzel Boston was there to be picked. They didn't go with that. Then in the third round, they pick a running back, Kalen Black from the national champs, Indiana. This was a guy that wasn't invited to the combine. He only had 4 catches all of last year. Is that a guy that, possibly be the backup to Christian McCaffrey, who doesn't catch the football? Is a non-receiving threat in that backfield. I thought the fact that they didn't add an offensive lineman early in the draft, which is a clear need for an offensive line that could use more youth at that position. Mm-hmm. So it was a really strange draft for the 49ers.
What were people saying? Because they made a lot of picks that surprised most of the people who prognosticate about these things.
This happens to be a real discussion in San Francisco media circles right now. Grant Cohn, the reporter out there in San Francisco, pressed John Lynch on it and said, no one had Kalen Black as a day 2 pick. Can you explain? And the 49ers, to their point, said, we have our own board. We don't care about the guys on TV. We don't care about the consensus. Our consensus is what matters, which leads to a greater point. The success of their drafts. There are some misses, there are some hits, and whether or not it matters where you draft a player based on what everyone in the consensus on TV believes.
Yes, no, obviously it doesn't. I mean, if you're taking a player in that spot, if he winds up being an excellent player, then that is
Stribling and Black are the big areas where Niners fans are saying, why?
They took them ahead of other players who most people had rated higher. Doesn't mean they'll wind up being better players, but I understand why those are the questions. Orlowski, give me one more winner from the weekend.
I'm going to say the Cincinnati Bengals, not only from the weekend, but also this offseason. I think they have improved as much as any football team in the NFL this offseason. Obviously, the addition of Dexter Lawrence. They get Cassius Howell, who was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year, I believe led the SEC in sacks. So we're talking about a football team that defensively has struggled for so long. Now they get a run-stopping and pass-rushing defensive tackle. If Cassius Howell takes a step forward, we know they acquired Brian Cook in free agency. this is going to be a good football team.
Boye
Mafe. If they can get a little bit out of their Shamar Stewart, their first-round pick from last year. This is the most complete football team that Joe Burrow has had since that Super Bowl run team that he went, I believe, in 2021. We know the offense is going to be great. We know the defense is much improved. A lot of pressure on Joe Burrow to go get it done this year, at least the next 2 years.
I think the flip side of that, if you will, is that there was pressure on the organization to make sure that Joe Burrow believed
Rightfully so.
in staying there, and maybe they've taken some steps in that direction.
Look, the Dexter Lawrence trade around the league, people are like, you have a 10th overall pick. The way the Bengals looked at it was they needed defensive tackle. There wasn't one to be had in the first round. The first one that went was Peter Woods, and he went 26 or 27.
A very late round
29th overall to the Chiefs. They looked at that as worthy of the 10th overall pick. They paid Dexter Lawrence. They got that done. That's going to be the whole key of this winning draft. Dexter Lawrence, who wasn't even a player selected this weekend.
And, you know, D. Wood, there's a lot of different ways to look at things. Or the last day that I was here, so last Tuesday, Graziano was making the point, the Bengals look at themselves this way. They're the only team in the division that didn't change coaches during this offseason. They're all of a sudden the stable franchise in the AFC North, and they're just a little defense away from potentially being a legitimate contender.
Absolutely. And again, just to echo what Dan, I love what they've done via free agency and the draft on the defensive side of the ball. You know, because they've just been, quite honestly, they've been atrocious on that side of the ball. But the additions that they've made, I think these guys are going to be impact players on that side of the ball. Bengals can score with anyone. I think the biggest thing is Joe Burrow has to stay healthy. Joe Burrow has to stay on the field.
He's got to take that on himself a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. He has to take ownership of that, because if Joe Burrow is healthy with the additions that they have on the defense side, the Bengals are going to make some serious noise in the AFC.
Well, so you know, because you sit here with Rex every Monday, Rex has been very critical, not so much of Burrow, but of their offense in general. The way it's designed winds up with Burrow getting hit a lot. Is that something that they need to address?
They started to a little bit last year at times when Joe wasn't on the field and was the other Joe Flacco.
Who's back, by the way.
In the offensive line, I've been critical. It improved last year, that offensive line. So it's a little bit of scheme. It's a little bit Burrow. And I also think, just touching on the Bengals, Greeny, it is very interesting that we sit here in April right now, and two quarterbacks that have gone to and one has won a Super Bowl in the last 5 years kind of have like a little bit of a question mark with their future. Joe Burrow being another one and Jalen Hurts being the other one. There's a lot of pressure on those two players, whether strictly by performance or, you know, availability to just what is their long-term future within that organization and that team.
What do you think? Final word.
I think it's really interesting to vision as a whole, because the Ravens are going over a whole overhaul of their coaching staff, and the Steelers, of course, are as well. And we've always considered those the two powers, and the Bengals this X factor. Are the Bengals the favorites going into the season? This might be the first time we've said that since they went to the Super Bowl that year.
I thought the Ravens had a great draft myself. I thought the Ravens did very well over the week.